Thank you all for coming. We're so pleased to have Juan Carlos with us. Dr. Juan Carlos Galeano, born and bred in the Colombian Amazon, is with us today from Florida State, where he has taught for over 25 years. He came to this country and studied, got his doctorate in Kentucky in 1993. And yes, he's Dr. Juan Carlos Galeano, but first and foremost, call him poet. He is a widely published poet, beginning with his first book of poetry, Baraja Inicial, in 1986, and until the latest one, Historias del Viento, from 2013, which he will read from tomorrow at 11 in the JFSB B037. He will be reading in Spanish, so even if you don't know Spanish, poetry in Spanish sounds really great. So you can come and just feel the music of it. A Renaissance man is also an accomplished academic and has done a lot of work on folklore and stories of the Amazon, which he published in Cuentos Amazónicos in 2007, which was translated in 2009 as Folktales of the Amazon. And also a filmmaker. We are tapping each of these skills and talents. Tomorrow in International Cinema, they will show his latest documentary, El Río, which is about, I believe is this the same community that we're going to be talking about today, or is it a different community?
Several of those communities.
Yeah. A documentary about living on the river and the relationship of the community with the river and how it is part of their life and part of them. He will lead a post-screening discussion at 6 right after following the documentary. So please, while he's here, let's enjoy his company and his wonderful talents. I know Juan Carlos mostly through email, phone conversations, and meeting each other at conferences. He's a member of the Association for the Study of Literature and the Environment, and is an accomplished and well-known eco-critic dealing with the relationship of literature to the environment, and much more beyond that. But he also, in connection with my life, he was what we call an outside reader for my dissertation many years ago. And I'm glad he said it was good, because I got a job because of it. So, everybody, please welcome Juan Carlos Galeano.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to see my notes here. But I was very pleased to hear the prayer, because I was telling Mac yesterday in the afternoon about how soon the people in Amazonian communities will talk about the religiosity involving the earth, and they will thank God. You know, I remember in one of the communities of the Amazon River, in the riverbanks, community of San Rafael, there is an animador espiritual. There isn't a father or a preacher, but animador espiritual, and he started the meetings of the community with that prayer, very similar to the one that your colleague, your student said. But I really want to thank the organizers, Dr. Mac Wilson, the director of the Kennedy Center, Renata, and others for inviting me. I was telling Mac that this is the first time that I'm giving this talk about study abroad. I have done it, but for many years, but I never was asked to share my ideas about study abroad, and so I want to start by saying that we are facing a new human condition, which is that of living dangerously on a fragile earth, on a failing earth. The term human condition, as many of you know, was coined by Hannah Arendt in the late 50s during the era of the Cold War. And which I really, think about that era as an era of, compared to what we are experiencing now, an era of quarrels among the members of our species. That to me seems a minor situation compared to the one that we face now. So what do we do as educators? When I'm asked to talk about this, it involved the most important thing that I've done in my life, which is being a teacher, right? What should we do as educators in partnership, in conjunction with official and government institutions, and also with communities, and also with others, members of the civil society? Do we have obligation as members of our institutions? Do we have obligations as members of our species, or as part of the earth, right? What contributions of ours can facilitate a rethinking of our path, and so we can foster the changing of our attitudes and practices? Those questions become the site where some of us feel situated. In my case, as a teacher, as a writer. It is also the position of the environmental humanities. As an educator, in times of this scientific realization now, that humankind is the major driver of planetary change, and where the powers of humankind may lead to the destruction of life. So in this presentation, I want to share with you some of my ideas about an academic experience in the context of a study abroad that I consider relevant. But first, I want to say, before I went and talk about specifically of a program that I facilitated with the fabric of my own experiences as a researcher, I want to say that it was the background that sustains my experience in the Amazon region is connected to all the past 25 years artistic and academic production. A great part of my creative and research work springs from the Amazon region. I'm the author of the book Folktales of the Amazon. I have made a couple of documentaries on spirituality and cosmovisions of Amazonians, and my poetry collections are fed by the ethnopoetics of Amazonia. So I was telling you that how the fabric for my ideas about the study abroad program came from my research, but also in a way too by the fact that I was born in the Amazon. So I'm gonna read just a short paragraph of a narrative connected to that moment. Before I go into talking about my field work and research in Amazonia that prompted ideas for the creation of those programs. So in this book, Folktales of the Amazon, there is a section at the introduction that says how the Amazonian tales in this book came to be. It's a title that I use when I refer to the programs. In the area of the Caquetá or Yapura River, one of the biggest tributaries of the Amazon, I lived in a small farm with my grandparents a couple of miles from the settlement where I went to elementary school. In those days, I liked to hear stories about the spirits of the forest and underwater world that the native people who helped my grandfather would tell at the dinner table. I always listened and asked them to tell more, though as the evening grew late, I would pay a high price, for I couldn't sleep afterwards. I thought the spirits would come to get me for asking too much about them. In 1983, I left Colombia, but I didn't forget the tales I had heard. After spending years abroad, I decided to investigate the stories told by people in different parts of the Amazon. In 1996, I traveled to the region to collect more stories or story fragments and recast them. I was inspired to do this because I was not content with the written versions of Amazonian folktales I had read. I was displeased with the way stories had been recreated or retold, worked from their local oral traditions and often described the indigenous inhabitants as savages and classifying the forest within the dichotomy of heaven or hell. I didn't like the excessive flowery and ornate language used by the Amazonian writers who had retold the folk tales, heavily influenced by the traits of so-called French Parnassianism, the artistic mode of poetic writing adopted by Latin American writers at the turn of the 20th century. Furthermore, existing collections of folk tales were specific to only one area of a single country. There were numerous illuminating studies of native folk tales done by linguists and anthropologists, but they were critical studies specific to those fields. So, so that tells a little bit about my background. So I was saying, my parents were settlers there. They came to Amazonia fleeing from the La Violencia in Colombia, which was a civil war that went on during the 50s and 60s. And so that's the reason I was born there. But what my parents were doing was exactly what's being done in all the countries that shared Amazonia, which was cutting down the trees and planting crops of corn and rice, and the second crop that, because the land doesn't sustain that kind of monocrop, so throwing seeds for pastures. And this was the policy done in all the countries that share the basin, pretty much. And so later, I didn't realize, the wrong of that, as a little one growing up. But later, I saw that this was as a result of the many constructs that had been made about Amazonia. The constructs made by the explorers, one of the first chroniclers of Amazonia was Fray Gaspar de Carvajal, a friar who accompanied Francisco de Orellana in the search of, who went to the Amazon searching for cinnamon, the brother of Pizarro. And they describes the land, the encounter with the Amazon women, but there was something very important that they said in those narratives. It was how those lands were suited for good monocrops of wheat, for instance. That wheat will grow very well here, and also for raising sheep, and so you can see that those narratives are still present, right? We got the big monocrops in Amazonia now, doing away with the place, And, you know, and it was connected with a series of constructs, you know, laid also about the indigenous people. French explorer, geographer, very important, Charles Marie de la Condamine, you know, in 1759, he wrote not only about the land, he made a journey throughout the whole Amazon River and, you know, ended up in the Atlantic. But he also talked about the people who live in these lands, indigenous people. They find them as stupid. He used the word stupidity, referring to the indigenous people, lazy, coward, not being able to conceptualize anything important because the indigenous languages were very poor. So you have all these constructs working together throughout the centuries. You know, I mean, we got Walter Bates going and talking, seen as a second paradise, you know, in the 1900s. But we also have, Teddy Roosevelt in 1914, you know, in a book through the Brazilian wilderness, he created all these narratives that we saw later all throughout the century enacted by, you know, Hollywood, you know. I don't know if you're familiar with Anaconda, you know, one of the, with Jennifer Lopez, right? So, yeah. Okay, so those were, you know, constructs, dichotomies, you know, hell and paradise and so forth. And with that project of mine, of going back to the Amazon in 1996 to listen to the folk tales in other parts of Amazonia, I found something totally different. I mean, contrasting narratives to those ones, you know. And who were the tellers of those narratives? You know, the Amazonians, hunters, loggers, fishermen, indigenous communities of Amazonia. They have those cuentos, those folktales about transformational beings, you know, like the pink dolphins or the guardians of the forest, you know, the curupira in the Brazilian Amazon, for instance, you know, very central figure, you know, a guardian of the forest in those symbolic narratives, guardian of the forest who is part of your kin, is part of your family, is kin to you. You know, some people call it tío, uncle. Some people call abuelo, refer to those guardians of the forest. And when people enter the forest, they make pacts with those guardians of the forest. You know, they take tobacco and you know, enact this you know, reciprocity ritual. You know, grandfather Chuyachaki is a guardian of the forest in the Peruvian Amazon. I come to you, I'm leaving this little tobacco for you. You know, please help me to find an animal for my family, or a job for my daughter in town, things like that. And those were the stories, you know, that I was listening to, or the Yakumama, you know, the Yakumama, Yaku, that means you know, water, mama, mother, you know, in the Peruvian Amazon, who will get upset at you if you are dredging the river or fishing too much. And in the narratives, people talk about, and that's the anaconda, right? The Yakumama is the anaconda. If you know that she will leave if she doesn't like you, or that there is too much noise, or that there is not much water. But why there is not much water? Because it's the deforestation in the headwaters, right? And so those narratives, I learned something different. I learned that they were symbolic narratives. Symbolic of what? Symbolic of a relationship with the lands. The spirituality of those people were connected closely to the land. That's what I learned. That those entities, those Curupira, Chuyachaki, Yakumama, all these guardians represented entire bioregions, the way an entire bioregion behaves. If I overhunt, if I cut the trees, there are going to be consequences. There's going to be famine later for communities. There won't be animals, right? So I learned something different from my hanging out, so to speak, in those rivers. And my method was pretty simple, came from, ethnography, I guess, when I use those words now. I will go to a little town, to the port. I stay in those communal hostels, where campesinos, peasants will come from upriver, down the river, to buy something that weekend, and I will start chatting with them. And go to their houses and spend time with them, go hunting with them, or accompany them to hunting. I didn't hunt, I was beside them. I used to hunt when I was a kid, just with the slingshots only. I went fishing with them. I went to their plot gardens in the forest to plant with them, And I did that in all the countries of Amazonia, Venezuelan Amazon, Bolivian Amazon, Peruvian, Brazilian, Ecuadorian. I spent many years doing that. Every summer, every winter. At the beginning, I thought it was going to be like a 2 summers project. No, I haven't left the place. So they told me something different. And during those years, I was helping in a program of an American university in Mexico, University of Guadalajara. The students went there, took Spanish classes. They went and, to Chile's, McDonald's, they went to bars every night and had a great time. And at the end of the program, the students were very happy. They say it was a great program. They had learned so much and all that, and it was great, But I wasn't convinced that was the way really for a program. So down the road, years later, after I had made a film on the Amazonian religiosity called "The Trees Have a Mother." In 2008, when that film came out or was being commercialized by the Film for the Humanities and Sciences, and the book Folktales of the Amazon, the English version, had come out, I thought that I wanted to do a program in the Amazon. So the way that program came to be was really, and you're going to see why, I came up with this narrative at the beginning of my conversation here, was a product of the most possible engagement with communities and with the people there that was attained through field work. Going there and being with the people, working with them, and listening to their stories. So I'm going to advance this. Okay, so we got Amazonia, something that prompted a need for us to do something, to act. That's a map of the areas where I was during my field work. Venezuelan Amazon, Bolivian Amazon, Guyana. And here is Quitos. Well, I'm not gonna, the circle is, I'm not gonna mess with your technology. There is, it's pretty too obvious. So yeah, and I developed a close relationship with the Quitos because I spent a year prior to the making of The Trees Have a Mother. And so I had developed a lot of relationships there with the place. And okay. So I created this program called Journey into Amazonia. That program went for 8 years, and then this year, last year, I did a program for Montana State University called the Amazon Way, and I'm not going to talk about that program, but just a little bit. It went terrific, even though it was in English. And you know what I mean when I say that. So then this is a typical picture of my program during those 8 years. Indigenous philosopher, Chaui. I gave Dr. Wilson a copy of a long interview about the philosophy of life of Amazonia and cosmovisions with Rafael Chanchari, and feel free to share it with all your students. So okay, I'm gonna start by talking about the goals and objectives of the program. Like in bullets, I have them there, but I would like to play this mini video of 5 minutes that one of my students made on the program. So, how do we do that? We're fine. Okay. Yeah. This is one of the communities that where I worked for the first film. People and land, that's what we're gonna see here. One of my students. Yeah, one of my students made this. Yeah. So I wanted to a program that facilitates for the student as much as possible to inhabit the subjectivities of the land and to be inhabited by the land too, both. To gain as much as possible the other's perspective. I know that it's impossible to know the other. We know that. But as much as possible, to learn by being in the place, not only through books, which we do here, right? We do as much as possible through that, but through observation, through conversations, and through participation. In other words, to become participant observers. So the way I designed it was, I'm going to skip the goals of the program there so I can continue here. It was a 1-month program. 3 weeks in Iquitos and surrounding areas, including a visit the first week to a community, to a primary forest, spend a night there, and to learn about the spirituality of Amazonians, the cosmovisions. And the last week in a trip to a remote place where there was no communication through phones or to anything, to Iquitos. And so the requirement for this program, it was a total commitment. I will tell the students, if you are interested in going at night to bars or to hang out, this is not the program for you. You better get the program in Spain, or, FSU has great programs all over the world with that kind of arrangement. They're great. People go study during the day, get drunk at night, and come back, and they're great programs, right? You know what I mean? So, I know, and I don't care if they listen to this podcast. Okay, so, because it's true. So that was a requirement. The other requirement was in terms of papers and presentations. I require a paper at the end. But this paper happened after that, for 1 month in the States, before they went to the Amazon, they have read a lot of the theory and done a lot of assignments and had come out with a natural history project on an animal or a plant. And they would send me research questions before they went to the Amazon. And then when we got in the Amazon, we revised those questions before they started the natural history project. It required a public presentation at the exiting ceremony and farewell dinner, public presentation where people from town were invited and all the participants. And I did it through homestays because I thought that was essential. It had to be that way. They had to live with a family from the place. They got an understanding through their narratives. The internships in which there were participant observants, and I'm going to talk about the internships. The natural and cultural history projects. The cultural history project, it was done through journals. That they have several journals. One journal for when they were doing their internships. Another journal when they were living with the family and in the neighborhoods. And another journal when we went for a week to do a project for an entire week in a community far away. So also there were a set of conferences and talks by scholars, biologists, community leaders given throughout that time, sometimes in the evenings, mainly because people were doing the internships during the day, and the rest of the hours they had free after 5 o'clock, they were working in their natural history project. How did this natural history project happen? Let's say a student was interested in a particular fish. This is something that they have researched all the lit review before they went to the Amazon here in the States. So they will go and spend time with the fishermen, families that fish that fish, that sold that fish in a variety of capacities, because they had a food stand in the port. By the way, that food stand sometimes was a site for an internship of a student throughout the time he or she was there, helping with the cooking and serving there. So it was somebody who was interested in a plant. Well, that person will spend a lot of time with a shaman who used that plant for medicinal purposes. So the internships, I work with NGOs. There was in projects of food security projects, for instance, helping the poorest people of town, the people who has come displaced from, a flood and have invaded certain parts of the outskirts of the city, that they didn't have anything but just 4 poles and a plastic, and many of you are familiar with those things, and open a hole just to get the water. Well, this NGO will show up with my students and some students from Peru too that were working, doing that pasantía, that internship, and start working with that family. Provide seeds and start developing those gardens that will improve the staple for the family. And also some of them even sold some of their production to neighbors. Internships with daycares. For instance, we're doing all kinds of service. I remember one of the most compelling ones was one in the Belen area, where it's a flooding area, where lots of houses are on stilts, and some of the volunteers from Iquitos, from Lima, from Spain, and my students were staying in the house with 3 or 4 children, in which the child who was 6 years old was babysitting the one that was 1 or 2 years old. And so my students stayed the whole day there until the mother, came back to the house. And that was a very compelling one, because there had been some accidents before in which the little one, because he was being taken care by his brother, who was 6 years old, had fallen in the water, had drowned. So to me, that was very compelling. That there were internships in hospitals. Some students who were interested in becoming a medical school students came to me, and I will arrange an internship with them for them at a hospital. Internships in elementary, high schools, as a teaching assistant at the university, at the Universidad Nacional de la Amazonía Peruana. Food security, there were translators at the immigration office. They work also with indigenous organizations, teaching drawing techniques or giving guitar lessons. There was a variety of internships. They were participating in mingas. You know the word minga. Many of you, come from Quechua, means communal work in which, people help each other. People who need to develop a plot garden, they go all together and work or build a house. So they were participating in that. There were a lot of that. I'm gonna just show some of the pictures and leave room for some questions. So let's see. So those were the objectives, and the methodology. I explained the methodology. This is some pictures of the city where my students worked. It's a picture at night. That's my student Vincent Lugo this is like, 12 years ago. English creative writing student. This is at the Iquitos, Hospital Iquitos, the main hospital. Two of my students. Those are students teaching high school. This is La Restinga facility that was a refugee for street children of Iquitos, and they had a variety of programs. He was a student from psychology, sharing some of his knowledge in a program that they had at the moment related to domestic violence in the city. So he's sharing some of the things that he brought from the States. So the idea was about sharing, working at the main library, Universidad de Amazonas, cataloging, and also helping some of the people who came who were foreigners sometimes. Building dry latrines in communities in the Napo River with a Switzerland NGO. Student of mine giving guitar lessons at the Formaviap, the main indigenous organization, which has a cultural university in the outskirts of Iquitos. Food security projects. So this is teaching assistants at the university, Universidad Nacional de la Amazonía Peruana. So, I'm ready for your questions then, because I think that I spent a lot of the time.
Thank you. We know some of you will need to leave for class. If you do, please do so quietly. The rest of you who have questions, please ask them at this microphone so we can all hear the questions as well as the answers. Just tell us your name and what you're studying so we can get to know you a little bit as well. We'll just go as long as there are questions.
Hi, my name's Paul, creative writing and history major. I spent some time in Mexico working with an indigenous group as well. I was curious to see how you started this program and how you got, I guess, the traction to actually do something like this and work with this group of people.
As I mentioned at the beginning, I was born in the Colombian Amazon, so I grew up with indigenous people And so that's the reason perhaps that later as an educated person in the Western culture, I returned to learn from those indigenous narratives in the Amazon. And by doing so, as I was telling, I became very acquainted with the problems of Amazonia. And I thought that it was very, very important for Amazonia to have allies in the West. And how do we attain that? Well, by facilitating, not by teaching, because I don't believe that. I don't think anybody teaches anything. I think that we facilitate, we provide certain moments, certain narratives, certain experience to others, and for others to make their own decisions, to craft their own destiny, so to speak. So that's what I thought after I had spent a good number of years with Amazonians and with indigenous Amazonians in all these countries of the basin. I thought, and I had that experience in Mexico with the international programs that I just mentioned. And I've seen international programs, there's a lot of business involved there. Not much of a mission, So I wanted to craft it in the way that I saw that it may possibly work. Over those 8 years, there were about 95 students who went, and absolutely all of them that I know are very successful in their lives, as medical doctors, as teachers, as artists, as musicians, folklorists, biologists, have developed programs in cities in the United States, because the program, I didn't talk about the method, the outcomes and all that, but it was to give up skills to the students to work anywhere in the world in a traditional culture. That was my idea. That you have, and it requires a lot from you. You have to allow yourself room for ambiguity, for tolerance of others. You can't go with this type of A personality. If you have that type of A personality, I will tell them, at least that you are willing to compromise. Unless that you are willing to see the world from as much as possible from the other people's perspective. This is not a program for you. Yeah. If you have the need to go out every night to go and get drunk and have fun, this is not a program for you. So, yeah, I think I don't know if I don't think that I answered your question. I went to the other. But did I answer? Yeah. Okay.
First of all, let me thank you so much for your talk. Muchísimas gracias.
Sí.
And what I was really curious about is your comments on developing the counter story, the true narrative of the indigenous voice.
Exactly.
Now, when at the Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, I love all that. So, what I'm curious about is what do you do when, even at a place like BYU, you have some who are clearly convinced that there's climate change, that we're largely responsible for it, want to be active, but you have most of the campus taking on a narrative that doesn't really quite see it that way. So we have a group on campus, a number of ecology groups. They're trying hard to actually promote this lecture series. But the truth of it is that, again, most students are distracted. They have their own story they're telling about their lives, about their immediate needs and things. So what do you suggest in that regard? You've been on the American college campus for a long time. How do you, in your own work, try to raise awareness, mobilize the young people, as we're trying to do now here at BYU? In fact, Emily over there, if you'd raise your hand, Emily, she is the student largely responsible, trying to bring together the groups that are all in favor of sustainability. But it's hard. And so I guess I'm asking for your advice. How do you develop that counter-narrative?
You are telling me about something that I think about 24 hours a day. Because yes, I'm a poet, I'm a writer, but this circumstance is so present right now that I am myself involved in the impossible. In my own campus, right now, I'm going to have an Amazonia week with no money, just taking advantage of friends from other American universities and the fact that they are committed, that they are coming for free to my university to participate in this Amazonia week. I have my students, an entire class, involved in projecting a whole series of advertising, marketing of this Amazonia week on campus. I have an ally at the dean's office who is creating from my student selfie videos talking about why Amazonia week, why Amazonia is important in regards to Amazonia itself, but also in regards to the earth, to the planet. Mm-hmm. Connecting the whole, connected the dots. And I have the people. I mean, it is easy for me to say to a scholar, hey, could you come, some of them come for free because they are my friends. Their universities pay. Because my university doesn't have money, budget for that. And so it's easy for me to tell them, and they will come to give a lecture. But the kind of things that I have engaged, I am bringing biologists and people who are engaged in a strong fight and defense against, oil drilling, mining right now in the Peruvian Amazon, directors of national reserves who are very engaged in those fights. They don't know any English. So I got my students' teams working on their PowerPoint presentations a month before. And I'm reviewing those PowerPoints before. I don't know anything about PowerPoint, as you could tell. But more or less, I have an idea. So revising them, I'm working with my students and with those people that are coming from Peru who don't know a word of English, but I'm gonna bring them there, teaming with my students, doing simultaneous translation because, there is somebody who's a biologist who is writing his dissertation with me, so he habla español perfectly and all that. So doing the impossible, I think we are Don Quixote, And so your question, it just came right to my, yeah. So as much as possible.
Que viva
That's
la
all.
lucha.
Yeah, sí, gracias. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for the lecture. Going along with that question, what would you say is the most impactful in the students? Like, do you feel, I'm sure you saw, like, how did they transform their lives after being there? Were they able to connect more to nature or to, or the service part, what was the transformation it happened to them after, and what that program is valuable, in life?
Right. Okay, well, many of those 95 students engage in the public health career. Some of them as medical doctors, in public health administration, and they are they have gotten that philosophy of learning to help others. And they learn it there because we have a doctor 24 hours a day with us, who, whenever we went to communities, that doctor was, because he wasn't helping us, I mean, we were fine, he was helping the people in a lot of the communities, and some of my students were working with the doctor right there and seeing that kind of attitude, from that. Other students, the ones who was working for that NGO, the Food Security Project, he was a student of economy. He became a biologist after the program, and he developed programs in the city of agricultural programs in Tallahassee. He has won prizes, I think one in Gainesville. This is after 10 years, and he was in her third year of economy when he went there. And so other people are working in cultural centers here and in this country. Those are people who went there and were in projects with indigenous organizations. So I see it in many ways. People, aside the fact that their relationship to nature change, I see them leaning to the right causes, doing the right things. Yeah. As professors too, working and teaching, giving guitar lessons there. She's working at PhD University of Texas in history, Latin American history. One of my students who was interested in the natural history project, he has chosen the anaconda. He ended up writing honor thesis on anaconda and capitalism. That was his honor thesis at the university. Now he's doing a master's in history and in UF, University of Florida, and his plan is to do a PhD and become involved in Latin American policy in the United States. So that's his goal. So I can't think of one of them that I have found out that is not doing the right thing, towards the right thing. So again, we have dedicated our lives to be teachers. That's the way that has been my destiny here in this country. So I think that that's something that we could do to contribute to society, if you will, Yeah, I mean, the poetry, yes, that's something more personal, but and also it's connected to it, obviously, and other projects, but or the films, but this directly, being a teacher, being in a classroom, I think that we have some agency in that possibility of facilitating. I don't like the word teaching. I don't think that we try to enact like a program, like you got to do this, you got to do that. I don't think that works. It's about providing the right phrases, the right experiences, the right narratives, the right readings for the person to do it by himself, for she or he to do it by herself. Makes her own, to craft her own path. Yeah.
Please join me in thanking Juan Carlos one more time.